Okay, so in honor of Gimel Tammuz, which is coming up, we are going to learn the Maimer Yehi Imonu, which the Rebbe said on Gimel Tammuz, Tafshin Chaf Daled. Gimel Tammuz is connected with Yud Beis Yud Gimel Tammuz. Yud Beis Yud Gimel Tammuz is, of course, the Yom Tif of the Frierdiker Rebbe going out of prison, and Frierdiker Rebbe said a sikh.
No. In the train station.
It says before going to Kashrama.
That's what we're going to say in the film.
Oh.
So, Yud Beis Yud Gimel Tammuz is very connected with Mesiras Nefesh. How does the Yud Beis Yud Gimel Tammuz song go? Yeah. So the Rebbe says that in this song, you could hear the Mesiras Nefesh or the Mesiras Nefesh of the Neshama. So he says in the Hakdama to one of the Kontreisim in Likutei Devarim, Pashtus the Rebbe wrote it. So Gimel Tammuz was the beginning of the Gula, and this Maimer is very, very connected to the idea of Mesiras Nefesh. So it's a very geschmack Maimer. We learned some beautiful things about Mesiras Nefesh, so let's get going. Yehi we ask of Hashem that He should be with us and He shouldn't leave us. The Sikha of the Frierdiker Rebbe, the Baal HaGula. See, it's Gimel Tammuz, when the Frierdiker Rebbe was only released from prison, but he was being sent to Kastamah to Golus for a long period of time.
3 years.
3 years. What does the Rebbe call him over here on Gimel Tammuz already? Baal HaGula. It's Shem HaGula. From Gimel Tammuz already, it's a Changeben de Gula. So, the Frierdiker Rebbe said a sikh with a lot of Mesiras Nefesh. There's quite a few stories of what happened over there. First, the Frierdiker Rebbe was told on Thursday that he's freed from prison. He can leave Kastamah, not Kastamah, Shpalerka. He can leave Shpalerka, and but he'll only have something like 6 hours to prepare. And once he leaves, and after, he's going to have to get on the train and go to Kastamah. He asked how long it's going to get there, and it came out that he would be there on Shabbos. He'd be traveling on Shabbos or arriving on Shabbos. And the Frierdiker Rebbe said that he's not going. He's going to stay in Shpalerka until Sunday, so that he doesn't have to travel on Shabbos. Which this was an act of Mesiras Nefesh beyond comprehension. Shpalerka, every minute that somebody spent in Shpalerka, any random officer could take him and shoot him for no reason at all. And the Frierdiker Rebbe was not only allowed to, was should have not taken that act of Mesiras Nefesh upon himself. But Al Pi Nigled was a time of Shmad. But this we see over here, and then the rules are different. But we see over here the tremendous Mesiras Nefesh. And then when the Frierdiker Rebbe got out, he was told he's not allowed to talk to anybody. The stories I heard from Reb Leima Minkowitz, who he heard, I think, from his father or his uncle. A few things that the Frierdiker Rebbe did in that short period of time, it's in the 6 hours that he had to get ready to go to Kastamah. And he possibly, there was a chassid over there whose daughter wasn't well. I think he possibly asked, "How's your daughter doing?" I mean, it's just like, it's hard to imagine coming out of his mind-boggling, coming out of Shpalerka on his way to Kastamah. The Frierdiker Rebbe is looking after the chassidim and wondering how this person's doing and how that person is doing. He gave some papers with ma'amorim. I think he gave it to Leima Ichkes. I forget his name, but I never chassid. He gave it to him so that he can transcribe them. Then he went to the train station. Nobody was allowed to be at the train station. It was supposed to be a small, quiet affair. But of course, all the chassidim came, and there was a tremendous crowd over there. And the Frierdiker Rebbe then said a fiery sikha. That's when he said the famous words that, quoting David HaShabbat, the Pashtus, that in Golus only our bodies went, but our neshamas didn't go in Golus, and nobody has power over our neshamas, and he demanded more Mesiras Nefesh from the chassidim. So this was a sikha said with tremendous Mesiras Nefesh. And in that sikha, the Frierdiker Rebbe quotes this pasuk, and he teaches the pasuk as follows: we ask by Hashem, may Hashem be with us as He was with our fathers. He shall not forsake us and not abandon us. And he teaches it in Yiddish. Hashem is Baruch soll sein mit uns und wird sein mit uns. The Eibishter should be with us and will be with us, as he was with our fathers. And Deb asks an obvious question of a request and a guarantee. And are l'chura two different things. And not only are they different things, they are opposite things. Because when you have a guarantee, so you don't have to ask for it. It's not a request. You know that it's going to happen. You don't put in a request. When you put in a request, it means either the person who you're asking can say yes or can say no. So it's the opposite of a guarantee. The Fidik Rebbe says, he says them together both. The bakasha is, the Yehi, the bakasha is also a haftacha that he will be with us. Even though the word of Yehi can be touched either as Yehi, that it will be this way, or Yehi that we're asking that it should be that. We're looking at it 3 there, but it says V'ahavta, right? What's the Pirush HaPashat? V'ahavta is the Shem Elokecha. The Pirush HaPashat is that you should love. The Eibishter is commanding us. But another Pirush brought down in Chassidus is that V'ahavta, when the Torah says to a Yid, you should love the Eibishter, it's also a promise that you will love the Eibishter. It's in the Skech, and it's a promise that you will do whatever the Eibishter says. Is also a promise that you will actually do it. So, l'chora, what's the big question? Yehi can mean both. Yeah, but then it says obviously when you say one, you can't say the other. He puts them both together as if they're one union, and that's problematic. And the Fidik continues in the Sikha. This that we're asking and we're saying that the Eibishter will be with us, just as he was with our fathers. What's the big statement over here? The statement is, even though we cannot compare to our fathers. And what does it mean that we can't compare to our fathers? We'll get to that in a moment. The Fidik Rebbe's marker for this Pirush in Yehi Elokeinu. Where does the Fidik Rebbe take it? That why are we asking Hashem that he should be with us, although we're not with our fathers? You don't see it in the pasuk at all. It says that the mark of this is what it says in Medish. Shlomo Melech says to the Eibishter, a king who hires workers and they do a wonderful job, and then he pays them. What kind of praise is there to the king? There's no praise. He did what was fair and what was agreed upon to do. When is the king praiseworthy and praised? When he hires bad workers who don't do their job well. They don't even, from Lashon of the Medrash, it sounds like they don't do their job at all. And nevertheless, the king pays them. This is already a big goodness, a great goodness. You see over here the graciousness, the broad-mindedness of the king. Can forgiven to give, the poor workers, even though it's their fault and they didn't do their job. Yeah, how many times is it when you come, when you talk to somebody, or sometimes we say it ourselves, and you say, this guy, he's in a lot of trouble, we have to help him, how can we help him? Are there with geld, are there with an idea, are there with, connections, or whatever it is, and the other person will say, yeah, but it's his fault. Like, what, he messed it up. I told him he shouldn't have done it. Say that. So because it's his fault, like, can't you help somebody whose problem is maybe that he always messes up? So he needs help, because whatever you do, he'll always kick the pail over and lose everything. And this is what Shlomo Melech is saying. They're pa'ilim roim. They don't deserve it. And still we say, you can still help them. You can still give them what they need. So this is a big shvach. And on this, the Medrash associates our pasuk. So the Medrash, so that's the marker for the Fidik Rebbe to say that this pasuk is talking about a case where we're not doing as well as we should be doing, and still we ask the Eibishter to be with us, and we say that the Eibishter certainly will be with us. Now, in what way do we not compare to our fathers? The Fidik Rebbe says in the Sikha, who can say how you this that we can't compare ourselves to our fathers is because our fathers had mitzvahs nefesh, and mitzvahs, and in this we can't compare ourselves to our fathers. So the Rebbe asks the obvious question: the very saying of this sikha was connected with his journeying to the Galus of Kastamah. For many years, the Galus And the Meiser was because of the Fiedekeb's Mesiris Nefesh, Bepoil Mamish, to strengthen and to spread Torah and mitzvahs. Not only was the Sikha associated with an event of Mesiris Nefesh, saying the Sikha itself was Mesiris Nefesh. And nevertheless, that we're not similar to our forefathers because they had Mesiris Nefesh, implying that we don't have Mesiris Nefesh. How could the Fidik Rebbe say it? And as we know, everything that our Rebbe says is emes. So I saw Rabbi Stolik this Shabbos. It was very nice. You might want to teach that the Fidik Rebbe is including himself in Tzad Nivis. He's including himself with the crowd, and not only with the crowd, with all of the Yidden in Russia. And he's including in it Yidden who are only given up as a title of a Yid, but it doesn't really describe them. It's like a nickname. It's not their true description of what they really are. And it says Nefesh and Yiddishkeit they don't have, and perhaps even less than that. So therefore he said, so since he's including everybody, so he's saying that as a rule, if you include everybody, say that they're not that they don't compare to their fathers who were much more strong in their Yiddishkeit, right? We're dealing over here in Russia in 1927, and it was after generations of the Haskalah movement and then the Zionist movement tearing Yidden away from Yiddishkeit, and then never mind the 7-8 years of communism and the Civil War and World War I. And it caused a lot of Yidden Rahman al-Islam to become distant from their performance of Torah mitzvahs. Yeah, but he's trying to say that he's including everybody, even Hashem Yisrael Yechuna. So he's including everybody. So he's saying, Mitzad, all of these people who had no fault of their own, maybe, but B'Pel Mamish, they're not having Mesiris Nefesh. They're not having Mesiris Nefesh. Connection to this, a cousin of mine told me that when I think it was his great uncle, had a child in Moscow in the 1920s, early 1930s, and he had an old Lubavitcher uncle, used to be a Lubavitcher uncle. His name was Berel Gerevich. At that time, he was already known as Boris, and he was a colonel in the KGB because he was a believer, not because he didn't have a choice. And he had a child. The nephew had a child, so he went to tell his uncle that he had a child. He didn't lose his mind. So he goes into the KGB building, into the KGB offices, and he's meeting with his uncle. And he tells his uncle, I had a child, whatever, 8 days ago, 7 days ago, whatever. So his uncle asks him, so he doesn't know what to do over here. He asked him, he told him in Yiddish. He doesn't know, he starts ecking and becking. He says, how can you talk like this, talking about old-fashioned things in the beautiful modern Russia that we're in? And he heard him out, and then he told him, mach him a bris. He says on sei sicher, like be sure to make him a bris. You don't know what's going to be the next day. So here you see that even a Yid who Kivyachol left Yiddishkeit and was a colonel in the KGB, thought they had Mesiris Nefesh. But be it as it may, there were some people who perhaps couldn't have that title of Bali Mesiris Nefesh B'Payel, and the Fidik Rebbe was including all of them. That's why I said that Mir Zayin and we're not. This is not enough of an explanation that we are not comparable to our parents, to our forefathers and fathers. Mir includes also himself. So the Fidik Rebbe is including himself in this description of people who don't have Mesiris Nefesh. You can't say it was out of humility that the Fidik Rebbe included himself in this category. Humility is only shaykh when it's something shaverech. In other words, like this: if somebody says, and the guy is talking to him, tells him, "What says to davening? I see you look inside. You don't talk during davening. You prepare before. You can tell him the person he's into his davening." The guy says, boss, I've whatever. It's just a game." Okay, so in such a type of a story, it's a davar shebe'erech. So mitzad hanivis, the guy, even though he davens nicer than everybody else in shul, but mitzad hanivis, he feels that it's nothing. So that's something that makes sense. A person could feel that way and be authentic. But it's something that's not be'erech b'chlal. For the Frierdiker Rebbe to say, I mean, after he for 7 years, 8 years, had this nefesh against all threats, and despite, in spite of all the threats made against him, and for him to say that he doesn't have Mesiras Nefesh, that's not a nova. It's being inauthentic, and you can't say that's what the Frierdiker Rebbe was doing. Chas v'shalom. So we need an explanation of why the Frierdiker Rebbe is including himself in this category of people who aren't Bali Mesiras Nefesh the way our forefathers were. Okay, we're going to leave that. We're going to get back to that Mitzvah Hashem at the end of the Maimer. Now the Rebbe gets to the goof of the pasuk itself. In addition to these diukim in the sikh that we already mentioned, we also have to understand the pasuk itself. What's the pasuk say? The pasuk says that the Eibishter, our Eibishter, Elokeinu, Shehu Elikashalonu. So he's obviously with us. And especially when it's according to what it's explained in Chassidus, that Elokeinu means that he's our Kech and our Chais. In other words, Shem Elokim lowers itself and goes down to the level of the place where the Chais is coming to, and is very much with the place that he's going to. So the Eibishter is our Kech and the Eibishter is our Chais. By his definition, he's with us. Why do we have to place a special request? We also have to understand this, that he says that he should be Imonu and Im Aviseinu. What's the problem here? The Lashon Im Neifel al Davar Shu Tafel Lahadavar Shima. According to the rules of the Pashat, the meaning of Lashon HaKodesh, when you say Im, you mean to say that one thing is secondary to another thing. That the Ikar Yershim are the Yershav and the Yershav are only Tefillim. They don't have the same din of Yerusha, not with that strength. And nevertheless, he says that the Eibishter should be Imonu with us, with our fathers, which Pashut, according to the rules of Lashon Kodesh, according to the meaning of Lashon Kodesh, the understanding of this is Shavai Elokeinu Tafel Aleinu v'Laviseinu. We're saying that the Eibishter is Tafel, that the Eibishter is secondary to us and to our fathers.
But the word kasher means just as. So it's not just as. That's what kasher means.
Yeah, but that doesn't have to do with Imonu.
No. Yehi Hashem Elokeinu Imonu kasher, just as Hoya in Avoseinu be with us that too. That just like you go with them, be with us.
Sure, but he's not asking about that part.
No, but I'm saying, but that's what kasher means. It's a making a comparison between Avoseinu and the present.
100%.
Just as.
But that's not his question here at all. He's talking about something else. He's saying Yehi Elokeinu Imonu kasher Hoya im Avoseinu. He's asking on the Imonu, that Hashem Elokeinu is Imonu, is with us, and that Hashem Elokeinu is Im Aviseinu. And both of them imply that the Eibishter is Kivyachol secondary to us and secondary to Aviseinu. That's his question. He's not talking about kasher at all. He even skips it in his quote over here. Yehi Elokeinu Imonu and Im Aviseinu. Elokeinu is tough to us and tough to our fathers. That's his difficulty. Nicht sehr gut. That's his question. Okay, so we opened up a lot of, it's like we're peeling back, a cabbage or something. We opened up a lot of questions over here. Now for the next couple of ACs, we're going to be focused just on this last question of him. Right? We started off, how can Yehi be simultaneously a Bakasha and a Haftacha? And then he wants to know, how's the Frierdiker Rebbe saying about himself that he doesn't have Mesiras Nefesh? And then he wants to know, L'chora, why do we have to ask Yehi? Elokeinu means that he is with us already by definition. And then he wants to know, why are we saying Im Aviseinu, Imonu v'Im Aviseinu, that the Eibishter is tafel to us and tafel to Aviseinu chas v'shalom. And now he's going to focus just on that last part for the next two ACs, I believe. The reason for this, that when it comes to Yiras Shamayim, it's called an Eitzer. It says Eitzar Shel HaKadosh Baruch Hu. The Yiras Shamayim is the Eitzer, is the treasure of the Eibishter. So why is it described as a treasure? What's the connection? Who came just like the treasure of a king. The king cannot gather a treasure unless he gets it from other people. He doesn't create it himself. This is something that he gets from other people in various different ways. So Cain, So too Yira, which this is the treasure of the Eibishter, is also not in the hands of the Eibishter. Like it says, that the Eibishter leaves, the Eibishter runs everything and determines everything. There's one thing that is not up to the Eibishter that he leaves to the person to decide. If the person is going to have fear of the Eibishter, that's up to the person, and that's why Yerushalayim is termed a treasure, because the idea of a treasure is something that you need to get from others, and this is the one thing that the Eibishter needs to get from others. He needs to get it from the Yidden. The reason why Dafke Yidden is called an Eitzer, there's other things that should also qualify. A Yid has been get to all the mitzvahs. So why Dafke been get to this one? Huh?
Yeah, why should also have include Abba?
And really any mitzvah. Any mitzvah. The Eibishter can only have it if the Yid decides, because he has Bechira. So he explains it like this. In order to perform mitzvahs properly, it's either when the person feels within him a love to the Eibishter, or he feels a fear of the Eibishter. And from the differences between Ava and Yira is the Ava Savaya Ba Ali de Gilu Eir Milamayla. Ava of the Eibishter to the Eibishter comes when the Eibishter reveals himself to the person. You can't love something that you don't know. You could hear about it, you could understand it, but you can't love it. A person can only reach a feeling of Ava to the Eibishter when the Eibishter reveals himself, shines his light on him in one way or another. Then the person can be taken over with the feeling of Ava. So this comes milamayla. However, when it comes to Yiras Hashem, that comes primarily through the work of the person. And as we see, he's going to explain it more soon, but as we see, he starts off with this explanation. When it comes to a king of flesh and blood, this that the people of the kingdom fear the king is only because they accepted upon themselves that this person should be their king. Without that, they would not fear them. And see in Ha'ara 15, Vaharaya, and the proof for this, the Rebbe Rashab says in Samach Vav, if there's a different king who's not from his country, the fear and the awe of the king doesn't befall the person. Why? Because he's not his king. He's not his king. Not my president. I'll go upon him. It's not his king. What's the pshat l'chura? I mean, I would imagine that if I saw any king, even if it wasn't the king of my country, and if he told me to do something, I would assume that I would be terrified. I would assume the average person would be terrified and would listen to the king. But that's like a different type of fear. A person also fears if there's somebody, a known, killer, and he tells him to do something, he'll also do it. It's not pshat. The fear is only, it's a different type of a fear. It's only because you're going to be in trouble if you don't do it. But a fear just from hearing the name of the king. If somebody comes to the town and says, I have over here a proclamation from the king, it's going to be read in the town square, at 1 o'clock, everybody show up. So if it's in the king's own kingdom, everybody comes. And they stand over there with awe and with honor. They prepare themselves. They put on their best clothing to hear what the proclamation of the king is. What if some courier comes with a proclamation from a king from a different country and says at 1 o'clock we're going to read the proclamation of the king from the other country? Yeah, you're in London and somebody gets off the boat and he comes running on the thing and he says, I have a proclamation I'm making in the name of the king of France. You say that. Not interested. It doesn't bother. That's what the Rebbe Rashab is saying in Samach Vav, that you don't have a fear. In other words, we're not talking over here about a fear like when you're standing in front of the king. When you're standing right in front of the king, the person is going to overwhelm you. But a fear of the king, the pnimius, where it's not that he's a king, so you fear him. That's only on your own king. Be that as it may. So from this we see, from the fact that the only way a person will have a fear of a king is if he accepted that king to be his king. So we see that Yerushalayim comes milamata l'mayla. The Kabbalah Samach Sal Ha'am Soim Tasim Melech HaMelech, because Kabbalah Samach says after through the nation. Without that, the king cannot be a king, like it says in the pasuk Soim Tasim Melech HaMelech. Okay, so l'chora, what he's answering over here is that you have Ava and Yira. Now, all of the mitzvahs can be done either through Ava or through Yira. And when it comes to mitzvahs, so maybe taka, then that in the end of the day, the person is b'chira chavshis. But the Eibishter milamayla lamata can show his closeness to a person, and that will bring a person to a feeling of ava to the Eibishter, and with that, he'll do the mitzvahs. However, there's one mitzvah that the Eibishter can't do that with. There's one mitzvah, and that's the mitzvah of Yiras Shamayim. When you get to all the other mitzvahs, the Eibishter can reveal himself to the person. The Eibishter can show himself to the person, and then automatically the person is nisayra with the ava to the Eibishter. That's the nature of it. When it comes to Yiras Shamayim, the person has to dafka take it upon himself.
It's the thunder and lightning.
That's like the killer coming, saying, I'm going to chop the person's head off. That's not the fear that we're talking about. But also in the end of the next paragraph, you'll see, in a way, he addresses that. Because that's a very chitzeniistic yira. It's very chitzeni, and he'll get to that in the next thing. The chol here was talking about is a yira mitzad the inyan, the Eibishter. I fear the Eibishter because he's the Eibishter, not because of some punishment. And according to this, we now understand why the pasuk says that the Eibishter is Imonu, is tafel to us, and is tafel to Aviseinu, because this pasuk is talking about Yiras Shamayim, is the Fidik Rebbe said that it's talking about Mesiris Nefesh, Ki Yiras Havai Shireshis Havai Devi Karav Shosha Yikiru Havai Des Adam Bagilu Ermel Mayla Vailkinu Rak Misayel Adam Imonu. The assistance that you get from the Eibishter is only a tafel; it's a secondary. But the main thing is that the Yid should do his Aveda to cause himself to feel a fear of the Eibishter. So that's why the pasuk says that the Eibishter is secondary in the story. In the story of Yiras Shamayim, the person is the main player.
So maybe that's the part I don't understand. Why does Imonu signify the fact that HaKadosh Baruch Hu is tough on this?
By the rules of Lashon Kodesh.
Explain how.
When you say, in a style, we'll see another example, but in language, you have many words to describe the same thing. For example, to describe talking, right? You could say somebody is talking, speaking, stating,
Right.
proclaiming,
Right.
shouting.
Yeah.
They're all saying the same thing. The person is saying something, but each one, something's going out of his mouth. But each one has a different understanding, a different emphasis, right? So it's the same thing when you say that things are together. So one thing is with another thing, okay? So in Lashon Kodesh, and perhaps also in English, what you're saying is that you have the primary thing, and the other thing is only with it. Especially by the rules of language. As it's not up for discussion. I'm saying it's not a matter of an understanding. It's a matter of this is what Imonu means. This is what he means. He brings a raya over here from from the Gemara in the brackets towards the end of the first paragraph of Beis. When it gets to the dinam of Yerusha, where you have a husband who passes away, and I'm not familiar. The Rambam brings it down, but I'm not familiar now with the technicalities of the din. But the question is, who inherits the wife? Okay, who inherits the wife? The husband, the yershim of.
There's no kids.
The yershim of the wife's father, yershei ha'av, because the father isn't alive now. Or yershei ha'bal mitzat hakonos chachamim, right? Because by midiraisa, a husband doesn't yarshin his wife. The chachamim were misakin it, so the takonos of the ksuba. So in this case, like I don't remember the technicalities of the case, but in this case, we say that for whatever reason, yershei ha'bal, perhaps because it's not the Baal himself, because the husband isn't around. It's only the Yershim of the Baal. If the Baal was around himself, he would Yarshin his wife B'Pashtus. These are Yershei Baal. And so we say that the primary Yerusha is for Yershei Ha'av from the mother's side. In other words, the Yerusha goes back up to her father, Medin Teda, and then Medin Teda goes back down to whoever the inheritors of the father are. However, the Yershim of the husband, his brothers, his father, or his descendants, they also Yarshin, im Yershei Baal. That's the way it goes.
What Imonu over here means is that the human being is making the statement, Yehi Hashem Elokeinu Imonu. He's with us, meaning
very good.
I'm
Good.
Imonu, that I'm the Yikah.
It's a tougher.
And then that goes Baruch is the tough. That's the
in English, you might say.
You got it.
In English, you might say, You know why we're right? Because God is with us, and it's used by every
God is on our side.
God is on our side. Yeah, you take God to your side, and now whatever you do is kosher, yasher, everything is good, right? What's the what? That's where you see that that's where you see that's where you say the Eibushter is tougher. What's the right way to say it? If the person isn't
we
one
are
of
on God's side.
yeah, I'm on God's side, and that's why
I'm on
and that's why we're going to win. That's already a whole different story. Okay, so here we came to the conclusion that Imonu means tough. Good, very good. Why is it fact that Yira is distinct amongst all the 613 mitzvahs and really amongst everything else that there is? That Yira is the one thing that's left to the person. What's the explanation? Yeshlema, Rebbe gives a beard in it. Ki Yira he bittul. What's Yira? When somebody's overcome with fear of something else, he's bottled to that something else. He goes out of his own strength, his own security, and it becomes bottled. Ubefrat Yiras HaMelech, and especially when we're talking about a fear of a king. Why? Because same tasim, like it says in the pasuk, same tasim Melech HaMelech, that you shall appoint upon yourself a king, and there's a double lashon over here, same tasim, and the Gemara explains that there's a mitzvah pashat that a yid should fear a Yiddish king. It's a mitzvah. The Torah says that you should fear a Yiddish king. So this is a bittul to a king. Why does the person have a yira from the king? Because he is the king's slave. Like we mentioned before, you can have yira for many different reasons. You can have yira because of the greatness of the king. You can have yira because of fear of punishment of the king. But the main yira of a king is mitzad this, that you are his servant. That's the main yira of a king, that I belong to the king. And therefore I have a yira from the king. I don't have my own mitzias, I don't have my own existence. I'm a slave to the king. And the teva ha'eved hu she'ema supachad ha'adin olav. And the nature of a eved is that the fear of the master is upon him. Now this bittul, the bittul, not just a different, not just any type of bittul. We're talking over here about the bittul of an eved, too, because we're talking about the ema from a king. Bittul, the eved, bittul betachlis. And the bittul of an eved is a bittul that it has to be betachlis. If you're not bittul betachlis, you can't take on the title of eved. You're not an eved if you're not bittul betachlis. You could be many other things. You could be a good person too. But if somebody's not bittul betachlis, he can't say that I'm an eved to the Eibishter. Somebody wants to say I am an eved Hashem. He has to check that they're cooking. Is he taka bittul to the Eibishter and everything that he does? And if he's not, so is it nicht abnaden. And say, I am an Eved Hashem. I'm working to be an Eved of the Eibishter, but I'm not an Eved of the Eibishter yet. So he says like this, and such a type of a bittul betachlis, cannot come from the Eibishter, and that's by definition. It must come from the person. The effect that happens to a person if it comes from above, it's like something external that was as I stuck onto him. And therefore the change that develops within the person because of this is not a change that goes to the essence of the person. It's only a change in the tzir of the person. We'll try to explain it as best as I could in a minute. This is not a change in the person himself. In order that a person should come to a bittul betachlis, where it's not just in his tzir, it's in his etzem mitziyusay, which that is required for there to be a bittul of an eved, a bittul to the king. This comes dafka through the aveda of the person himself to be the eved of the melech. What's he saying over here? He's saying over here that what's required over here is a bittul betachlis, where the person is completely and entirely bittul to the melech. There's nothing of him left other than this thing that he's the eved of the melech. How can such a thing be accomplished? So he says, you can't accomplish it by the king scaring the living daylights out of him. Because if the king scares the living daylights out of him, so he changed his behavior. He changed what the person is doing in his day-to-day. He changed what the person says. He changed even what the person looks like. But the person himself has never changed. The only reason why he's being an eved to the king is the king scared the living daylights out of him. And it goes very deep. But even if it has an effect on this person for his whole life, for 70, 80 years, he becomes... Being a muscle from an elephant, yeah. They say, if you go to the circus, you see the elephants are being pulled by these, are being tied to these small little, nothings. And they're being tied by a rope that they could easily just, literally start walking and drag the whole thing away with them. But they don't, these massive elephants, and they leave it there. Why? Because what the trainers, no,
They get prodded.
no. That's a more chitzenistic.
They understand what's wanted from them.
No, it's not. So it's very interesting, because when the trainers get the elephants, they're babies, and from when they're a baby, they tie this rope around their foot, and they put it on this thing. And as a baby, the elephant learns that when your foot is tied, you can't move. That's it. When this thing's around your foot, you're staying in this place. As is Gavana Metzias. And then, even when they grow up, and elephants live 50 years easy, even when they grow up, it's just a built-in thing. And when the rope is around their foot and it's over here, look diminished. You don't move. That has the memory of an elephant. So I'm saying this type of external force can have a very deep effect on a person. It can change his behavior. It can change his whole tzir. I'm lacking the words to shut the tzir of a person, but it can change the person's whole tzir. And everything, you have the essence of the thing and then the tzir of it. For example, in an act, it's image. For example, in an act of love, when somebody does something out of love for somebody else, the tzir could take different forms. In other words, the tzir is, in what way does it come? How does it express itself? How does it look? It can come either as a gift. Sometimes it comes as the person screaming at the other person. Sometimes it comes as the person criticizing the other person. Right? Critiquing, criticizing somebody is not always a bad thing. Sometimes the love of the person causes him to criticize somebody because he sees that the guy's pashat he's not a mensch. He's ruining his life. He's messing up his life. And out of love to him, he tells him, you got to change. This is not, I love you, I'm your friend from 1 year old, but you got to change. So the tzir of something is a very external factor compared to the pnimius of something. That's a muscle. It might be, there's definitely are better mishalim. But the point is that the tzir is an external expression of something much more internal that's there. We're going to leave it at that. Maybe next week, if David helps, I'll be able to think of a better way of explaining it. But the bittul that's causing somebody, when you force him into something, when you come as an external force, is only in the tzir of the person. It's not. It's in which the tzir of the person's chitzeni is compared to the person's etzem mitzuyosei, and therefore it cannot bring about a complete bittul. It doesn't touch etzem mitzuyosei. Etzem mitzuyosei remains untouched. This is very connected, by the way, to a part of Hashemayim Kisi that we were learning until now. We was talking over there about the bittul of Kabbalah Soil versus the bittul of Ashiris, the bittul of Shemayim Ba'aretz, that comes from understanding the greatness of the Eibishter. But that is Betzim Mitzvah. So he says like this: since the bittul to a king is the meaning of an eved, and an eved has to be completely bottled, therefore, by definition, it can't come from above. If it comes from a force that's external to the person, a part of the person will remain as he was before, without bittul, and therefore it must come only from the person himself. Okay. The same thing holds true for Mesiris Nefesh. Since Mesiris Nefesh is the ultimate bittul, in a way, because the person Pashat loses himself entirely for the sake of the cause, for the sake of the Eivishter. Especially when the Mesiris Nefesh, this is true of any Mesiris Nefesh, but it's even more true when the person wasn't even told by the Eivishter to have Mesiris Nefesh. When the person was told by the Eivishter to have Mesiris Nefesh, it's still a bittul b'tachlis because he's giving up his life entirely. But in the end of the day, the Eivishter told him to do it, so it's not mitzad him. It's not a bittul b'tachlis. It's not the Eivishter told him to do it. But when it comes to having Mesiris Nefesh for things that you're not chayav or pidin to have Mesiris Nefesh, so this is totally the person putting himself aside completely. And therefore, true Mesiris Nefesh is not when the Eibishter awakens the person milamayla to have Mesiris Nefesh, because then even though B'Peil Mamish maybe he'll have Mesiris Nefesh, but Batul B'Tachlis he wasn't. When the person works on himself and brings himself to Mesiris Nefesh, that's true Bittul B'Tachlis, that's true Mesiris Nefesh. And that's why when it came to Gimel Tammuz, when the Frierdiker Rebbe Kidiberos Binin Ha'avedet Mesiris Nefesh, the Frierdiker Rebbe was demanding that there should be a Mesiris Nefesh, and then he's asking the Eibishter to help us in this Aveda that the Frierdiker Rebbe is instructing all of his Chassidim to have in this Aveda Mesiris Nefesh. But over here, when you ask the Eibishter to help you with Mesiris Nefesh, you only say Yehi Alekenu Imonu, and you say Im Avesenu, because it's got to be your work. The Mesiris Nefesh has to come from the person himself, and the Eibishter merely helps you to achieve it. And in the Mesiris Nefesh that the Frierdiker Rebbe was demanding, which was that the Chassidim should go around and establish schools and take children on the Mesiris Nefesh and educate them as Frumesh and Mesiris Nefesh Tiki Yidin. This, nobody was chayiv to do it. There's no chiyuv in Torah that you have to go and teach somebody else's children and go to a different city. Maybe in your own city, you come to Chlada, and to run to a different city to make a mikveh, you're not chayiv. And this was the Mesiris Nefesh that the Frierdiker Rebbe was demanding, that comes from the person himself. The Kivan Chaved the Mesiris Nefesh Ha'ikir Hu Avedas Ha'adam Ha'gilu El Milamaylu Mesayel Avedas Ha'adam, any Gilu that the Eibishter sends to help, because Yitaka does help. But it's only a Mesayel, it's only an assistance, but it's not the work itself. That is why the Frierdiker Rebbe began his Bakasha and his Tefillah to the Eibishter with the Lashon of Imonu, because Mesiris Nefesh is pshat that you're Batul B'Tachlis, and Batul B'Tachlis means you don't get a free ride, not even from the Eibishter. The Eibishter doesn't do it for you, you do it yourself. The Eibishter merely comes to help you. Shkeach.
So we have another 2 weeks for you.
1 week. First of all,